All right, so we are now recording. So now I'm going to hit bright space. Okay, so let me in spring 2021. This is what 362. Okay. All right, so today I'm going to go to the content folder or on Brightspace. And as you know, we are just looking at this very simple lab. As you know, I showed you, so again, I always get these questions. Why is this file in there? This file, the book list, is just really to show you an example of what a PHP file looks like, you know, just to kind of illustrate how that will fit into our overall work later on in the semester. But, you know, as I said, I always think of this class as such a great class because you really can, from here, build real things. So we are going to proceed today. I provided this example. Well, the slides, we've already gone over those. I provided this example already, but I usually just like to code things from scratch so you can just follow along. Okay, and I'll be explaining kind of what we're doing. You'll basically see the pipeline of how, or the workflow. I've installed Notepad++. Remember, you can use any editor that you would like to use. You know, some students in the past have used brackets or they use, you know, look up something, try out a few, pick the one that you like. You know, the editor is a very personal preference, and there's certainly a lot of them out there. So pick one. But you'll see me just using Notepad++. So let's go ahead. So the first thing before I get to the homework assignment, let's just do an example, right? Let's kind of get started. So for this, I think I need to share the whole screen. Okay, so I think I'm sharing the whole screen now. So I can navigate between pages. This is a feature I just recently started. Okay, so here's my folder, okay? And as you can see, I'm in, you know, I have a folder here, intro, right? And then this is where I'm going to develop my website. Okay, so we're gonna use a simple website. Then you can see I have Mozilla Firefox. And so I will be running things usually on Mozilla, okay? So let's get started. So what am I going to do today? I want to do a website, right? But, you know, you guys already took 110. You know how to do a static HTML page with CSS. That's not really my goal. My goal is to start to think, right? We want to start to think about how to create dynamic pages. That's really what the goal is here, right? So that's our goal, to make everything as dynamic as possible. So that means we're building websites that are very much event-driven by our actions, are very responsive, right? And, you know, that is a lot of technologies leading up to Ajax and that approach. But let's just start today with just no libraries, just kind of from scratch, the very basic things, right? So this will hopefully remind you of the document object model, which is really the key. So usually what I do is I will just create a text document, such as this one. And then, you know, I can change this to HTML, right? Like that. I will need some images at some point, so you guys can just pick some images. What we're going to try to build is and yeah, I forgot to, let's just say, let's call this example 1. And you should be seeing this. So you should be seeing right now my folder where I just created an HTML file. Now I might just actually, just to be more organized, let's just call this work, you know, in class work, right? And I'm gonna move that file in there so it's easier for me to find. Okay. Huh. Did I move to? Oh, no, what did I do? It doesn't matter. In work, I'm just going to create a new file. Okay. All right. So I'm going to call it example1.html. So as you know, whenever you create a website, you know, you have some tags, right? So first thing I want to do is I want to do Notepad++, right, which I installed. Okay, oops, and I'm going to close that. We want to kind of build it from scratch. Now I'm not going to build, so really this homework assignment will have two problems, right? The grade calculator and then this problem that I'm doing in class. I'm not going to finish this problem. I'm just going to give you starter code, kind of give you the objectives. I will write out in the link what I want, but basically you'll have the two problems. So this one to finish, and then the grade calculator and the handout to build from scratch, okay? I guess I didn't ask if there were any questions. So before I continue, are there any questions, you know, either about the class or about this so far?
No, I have no questions.
No one has questions? Or someone had a question?
No questions.
All right, yeah, sorry. So I just I forgot to ask. Okay, so let's start then. So usually, as you remember, you know, you're going to add some tags, right? So you're going to add like the HTML tag, you know, the HTML tag. You can always make this a little bit bigger. Usually this will, okay. Oh, I didn't open, so sorry, that's not what I wanted to do. Instead of creating a new one, I want to open the one that I had created. So I'm gonna go to work, example one. All right, so now I have the file. So again, I'm gonna zoom in a little so that you guys can see it. All right, there we go, that should be better. All right, so I'm not I usually try to keep things very simple and clean, neat. So I'm not going to put in all the header tags and HTML5 or all that stuff. You guys can add it if you'd like, but I usually like to keep the code as simple as possible. So reminders, whenever you're doing tags, open and close them, right? You know, that's important. These are things I'm sure you already know how to do, but this is how I like to proceed. I like to just build everything in the class. Okay, and right, and then always try to run things when you have a little bit of information in there. So for instance, in the body section, this website, I want to build basically a little table, a type of a table where I display some books or something. It could be anything, DVDs, you know. And so whenever you have your mouse hover over them, it'll trigger an event. So that captures the basic idea, right? The basic concept of this course that you shouldn't forget is that these are dynamic pages. They're event driven. So when you do an action that triggers an event, and then you need to have an event handler, right? So something that catches the event, and we're just gonna use the, because we're on the client, remember the first half of the semester, we're just on the client side. So we'll be using JavaScript. The second in jQuery, the second half of the semester will be on the server side. And so we'll be using PHP on Linux. Now there is Linux on Windows, and there's really no difference. I just, I have a preference for Linux, and so I will be doing that in that environment. Okay, so now I've created this. Let's just really quickly add like a heading section, something along the lines of ITS 362 textbooks. Okay. Oops. Oops, there we go. Okay, so now usually, you know, I've created this content on the website. I'm going to save it, and now I just want to run it, right? So I'm in intro work, and I just want to run the website, and there it is, right? So there's my page, and that's it. You know, what you just saw is basically the entire pipeline or the workflow for the whole semester, right? At least, well, for the first half of the semester, we'll be on Windows, and I'll be doing this. And everything in between, what I just did from beginning to end, will just be, you know, adding more features, more code, etc. When we do this on the Linux side, the only difference is that on PHP, we'll have to be on you know, we'll have to have Apache running, Apache web server, and then run the pages from there. But I'll explain how all that works. So again, you know, pretty simple, pretty straightforward things. What we need right now, usually you need to have objects in your pages, right? You need to have objects. There are many tags that you can use. I like to use div tags usually. So we'll use that. Feel free to, you know, use your own things, your preference, but as long as you do, you know, you capture the idea. So I'm going to create a table, and then the table will just have the information about some books, let's say. And then I'll show you, you know, I'll remind you, really, I should say, I'll remind you of how you specify attributes associated with those objects. And then once somebody does something on the table, we need to have other information that is going to be hidden, but the information will appear once somebody does that action, right? So that's why, you know, for me, I'm just going to create some divs. And remember, this is all part of the document object model that we talked about on Tuesday. Sorry. All right, so now I'm going to go back. As you can see, I'm just going to go back to my website here and got my little page. Okay, so the first thing, still just doing HTML. Notice I don't have any CSS really. Usually later on, I will always ask you to have a CSS file, but I leave that to you. And it should always be a separate CSS file or what is called an external style sheet. Okay. So please stop me at any time. Also, I would recommend that you just simply follow along, right? So follow along. Okay, so let's create a table. As you remember, we can use the table tag. The table tag. Okay, and now we can basically, if you remember, when you use tables, you have to specify, okay, I have a few rows, and then within the rows, you specify the number of columns, which are the cells. We're not really going to have a heading for it or anything like that. It's just a very simple table. We're not even going to have borders for it. We're just going to have, you know, we just want to lay out. We're using this table for layout only. So now in the table, notice also I'm using the indentation. So I would recommend that you use indentation just to make it a little bit more readable. So I'm going to create table row. Okay. And I'm really just going to need one for this. In the table, I could have, let's say, as many books as you want. Let's just say I'm going to have a couple of, or 3 books maybe. 3 books might be. So, data, right? So the cells. And then I can just copy paste. Right? So, pick it up. Okay. So there we go. Oops. Okay. So once I have these things, you know, you can start to specify things. So what I want you to have is I want you to have an image in there, right? Anyone remember the name of the tag for images?
IMG.
IMG, right? Very good. Simple enough. IMG, we can specify a source. I will leave the source blank for now. I recommend that you start looking for some images, some appropriate images. You'll have to figure out the sizing and everything. Okay. So let's do, oops. Okay, so we close the image tag. You can have, remember if you want to add like a space, a break, right? You can do, BR tags, okay? Right, so something like that can add some spacing in there. Now, the thing that you may not remember from your 110 class, or maybe you do, is that these objects can have attributes that relate to actions that can trigger an event, right? So, they're not the event handlers, but they're the events themselves. So in this case, we can say, for instance, for the image, I want to have, because everything is object-oriented here, DOM, excuse me. So we saw this in the slides. I could say something like on mouse over. So on mouse over, guess what? I want to take some action. What that action will be is got to be a function call, right? So we would have to specify a function, okay? So I usually, initially, I just, create a function and put an alert in it or put something in it, very simple, so that I know that the functionality works before I actually start trying to, let's say, define all the logic, the correct logic of a function. So, so we can say on mouse over, or on mouse, let's say mouse, another one is on mouse move, right? So basically it means, and this is where you will play with these things. You can, play around with the functions, figure out which one is the appropriate function that you want to use, okay? So we can specify something in here, but we're gonna leave that blank for now. You can also add other events. So you can say on mouse out, right? So you can say on mouse out, and on mouse out, again, you can specify some other function, okay? And, so the functionality here would be, well, if on mouse move, maybe show the images, right? So if the mouse is there, on mouse hover over, if the mouse leaves the image, the information should go away. So now the idea would be maybe you have a picture of the book, and then when you mouse over the image, you actually show the name of the book, the author, the price, the quantity, all kinds of things like that, all right? So that's really the idea of this. That's the idea. So now that we've done this image, we can just copy paste this for all the other ones, and then we can modify them, okay, as we see fit. So I'm gonna do this, and then I'm gonna do that, and then I'm gonna do this. All right, and as you can see, now I have a few examples here, okay? So you'll have to find some images, but at this point, we just wanna run our code, make sure everything works, so we can do a refresh here, right? We can do view page source. You can see the code is there. These are all things that are useful. I can see already I have an error here with H, header 2 and header 3, right? So I missed something there. So let me go.
Professor Calix, how did you view the source code on Firefox? I didn't see that.
I'm sorry, say that again.
How did you view the source code on Firefox?
How did I view the source code in Firefox? I just so this is the page, right? This is the HTML page on the browser. I just right-clicked on it. And then if you click on view page source, you can always just see it.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah, so it's just a way, these are parts of your workflow to kind of quickly, one of the things I always notice with students sometimes is that they, Yeah, F12 works as well. Great, thank you. One of the things I notice with students sometimes, they just forget. It's funny, but they just forget or somehow get confused as to where they place the file. And what happens is they keep modifying, they think they're saving. The thing that they are rendering is from some other file. So just that's why I recommended that you always work on the desktop. Let's say, have the desktop, have a folder in there. Make sure that the file that you're working on is the actual file that you're rendering, okay? And another good way of doing that is just page source. You confirm that that's the code. So these are just kind of habits that you can develop. All right, so I notice I had this little error here with the H2. So I'm gonna change that back, okay? All right, so now I have I've laid out the structure, okay, of the things that will trigger events. And as I said, pretty much, even though later on, in about 3 weeks, we will start looking at 4 weeks, we'll start looking at jQuery. Right now, I just kind of want to show you, sort of how you would do it from scratch before we get into that. But the idea is pretty much the same. Okay, so now that I have the events, the actions, right, that trigger events, now I need 2 more things. I need to have the event handlers, right, which are code. They're going to be, actual JavaScript code that runs. And then that code needs to display other information. So you can have that information. You could have it, on a database. You could have that information on a text file somewhere. You can have that information in the code itself, or you could have that information in the static document as divs, basically. Basically, you can have hidden divs, and then the hidden divs would be displayed. So this is just one approach to keep things simple. Okay, so I'm going to wait, hold on. Okay, so now I'm going to have that information just for convenience displayed on a div. So I'm just going to show you how that would be done. So you might remember div tags. Okay, so if you took 110 with me before, you probably saw how we use these divs to create games, to move a dog and a ball and all that. So now I'm going to have the div here. And remember, one of the key elements that we will see as we start moving into jQuery, remember it's called jQuery, right? Query, remember that word query. So jQuery is also an interface to make your workflow much more efficient and intuitive. One of the things with that is just looking up things. So we will learn that we can look up things by class, tag name, category, name of the tag itself. So for instance, here you will see me give this a name. So I'm going to call it, I can give it, they usually have name and ID. I'm going to reference this by ID. So I'm going to say, oh, this is book 1. So it makes sense just to call it book 1. Remember that when you're creating these divs or tags or everything dynamically, you can always just in a for loop say book plus I. So for I in 10, book plus I, and then you can create all of these divs with their unique names like I just did. Okay, other things that you can do here just for simplicity, I'm going to do this with inline styles, although you guys should, get into the habit of doing external style sheets. So I'm going to do style, and then I'm going to say display, colon, none. That way I'm sort of hiding it in the very beginning, and so that I can display them later on. So that is basically it. I have one div. So the first div, which should correspond to this book, right? So if I hover over this book, then whatever's in here should be displayed. But I need to use CSS in combination with this HTML, with combination with JavaScript to kind of render all of it, okay? And so that will be part of your assignment, this week, to just kind of complete this code that I'm writing from scratch. So I'm gonna get it up to a certain point, and then you guys can figure out the rest. So you can see, for instance, here, I'm not gonna put in all the details. Here, I'm just gonna leave it to you, let's just say you say, I don't know, PHP, I'm just making up a name, PHP book, right? Find a book, probably that'll make your life easier. Then I'm just gonna add a break line here, right? And then I'm gonna put in, let's say, author, Robert, I'm just making up names, Oliver, okay? And again, you can add a break line. Okay, and then you can fill in other things like the, what do you call it? The publishing house, publisher, right? Okay, publisher. And let's say ISBN. Let's leave it there. So I leave it to you guys as part of your homework to fill this in with actual books, okay? Without actual books. I'm just gonna copy this now since I have 3 books over here, 3 images. Okay. Since I have 3 images here, I'm going to have, okay, so since I have 3 books, I'm gonna have 3 divs, just for this example, keep it simple. All right. And one more. All right, so I'm gonna say book 2, right? And I'm gonna say here, book 3. Okay, so that way, remember, each one of these divs has a unique ID, and that will allow me to reference the specific book that I want, okay? The specific book that I want. So now, okay, I have some data on my page statically coded in there. Doesn't matter, what it is. But now I have then the basic pipeline. Within my HTML, and I'm gonna say, within my HTML code, I have the table with images, which are the objects, the controls, where I'm going to perform an action and trigger an event. That is going to be based, currently, it's just based on these. Then that event needs to be captured by an event handler. That's gonna be the functions that will go in there. And then that event handler will display some information, which is what I have in these divs currently. And remember that you can place these divs anywhere in the page just by using, CSS, okay? So now let's the first thing we wanna do is complete the pipeline, right? So what we're missing now is you remember that Wendy's commercial, right? Where's the beef, right? So right now we need to add the beef of it, which is the part of the code that's the logic, okay? So we can go over here and we are going to add the logic, okay? So usually you can just write it in here. Later on, you're going to probably just use a separate .js file. So usually as our pipeline starts to get more complex, and in particular, as we start to go into MVC, okay, so I'm getting a question about, there are 2 problems, okay? There are 2 problems in the homework assignment. This one, which is a work in class, and the handout that I have provided. So when I create the link, I'm gonna say solve problems 1 and 2. This is problem 1, and problem 2 is the handout. Okay, so that answers your question, good. All right, so now, what was I saying? Oh, the simplest thing we can do right now is just to add the script, the JavaScript code. So I'm just going to say script over here. You can always put this in the body section as well, but just usually you create the link here. So I'm going to put script. All right, so I have my two tags for script. So now I can specify my JavaScript code on here. All right. And so usually, just to keep things simple, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a function, and I'm just going to say just a generic function, just to kind of test the pipeline. So let's just say books, something like that. All right, so I create the function. I'm gonna use, usually in C. You guys probably took C and C++ already. So this is how you write functions in C++. However, we're going to start switching our coding, let's say, style to the jQuery format, okay? That's one thing that will be a little bit difficult. That's probably one of the hardest things to get used to when you switch to jQuery, is using the jQuery style. But it's very important that you start getting into the habit of using this, because one of the problems with jQuery, maybe sometimes you could say, is that there's a lot of curly brackets and that a lot of parentheses, and they're all like combined. So you end up with things that look like this, like that, and so it's very easy when you have something like this to miss one, right? Miss one, and then and remember, JavaScript is not always the friendliest thing with little typos like that. So to avoid those kinds of things, we're going to start using a style of coding that instead of doing this, we're going to put the curly bracket there, okay? So although it seems, strange right now, this will start to make sense later on. But the reason why we do this is so that, as I said, it's just a style to make it more readable and easier to debug later on. All right, now that I have this, I can try just something simple like an alert. All right, so I can try something simple like an alert, right? And, let's say test, okay? So usually that's a good way just to complete the pipeline. So on mouse move then over here, as you might imagine, you would just want to put the alert, right? So in this case, call books. So you want to call books from the on mouse move. Okay, and then the last thing that we might need is we might need to have some kind of an image. Okay, so let me find an image here. So just give me a sec. Let's see if I can find an image. Just pick an image. You can find an image from the internet, I'm sure. Maybe PNW's image, right? Okay. Right, so Purdue Northwest, save the image. Onto your folder, a PNG or something along those lines. Okay. Okay, so I think I have an image now. So so I'm gonna add then the image on here. So I'm just going to say, because remember, we're in the current working directory, we don't have to specify a full path for this. Obviously, if you if you were putting your resources or reaching them from the web, you'd have to put in the full URL. So I called it pnw.png. Okay. Another thing you might ask questions about, you know, there are editors that allow you to instead of it always in the code, to actually generate the website in like an editor where it shows the page and you can edit in there. I would recommend that for this class, you don't do that, right? That you get into the habit of just always trying to modify things in the code. That would be a good recommendation, because this is a coding class and a lot of what we're doing is in the code itself. Okay, so now I'm gonna save this. Hopefully there are no errors. And you can see, and there's, oops, right. All right, so it's doing, every time I move, unfortunately, see, it does the alert. So probably,
we can't see that. We still see the code.
Oh, you can't see it? I'm sorry. What I meant is this, right? So I did, okay, I need to go here. So, okay, so hopefully now you can see my folder, right? And in my folder, I have my HTML file. And what I was saying is, now you should be seeing Notepad++. So now I've completed the pipeline. I have my table with one image associated on an action on mouse move, and I have the function. So I have the thing that triggers the event, and now I have the event handler. So this is the event handler, which is the function, you know, some name, books. I put the function in my script over here, and just for testing purposes, just so that I know that I can actually trigger that event and that my event handler works, I just put in a simple alert on there. So now remember that alert is currently not accessing the divs, because I haven't coded that yet. But you can see now that this is complete, I'm gonna go over, I'm gonna go over to the folder, right click on, or double click on that, and you can see, so hopefully now you can see, I added to my website an image, and you can see it, the alert is triggering. Every time I move the, see, it triggers it. So on mouse move is probably not the right, event to use, because it's annoying every time I move. So I'm gonna close this, and I'm gonna change my code a little bit. So maybe on mouse out, right? So I'm gonna switch it over to on mouse out. Okay. And this is basically the idea. So you always need to kind of find the appropriate event, right, that triggers the action. All right, so now I'm gonna go ahead and do the same. So this is saved. So I can go, okay, I closed the page. So I'm gonna double click on example1.htm. I'm double click on it. All right, there we go. See, now nothing is happening. Do you see that? I'm hovering over the image, hovering. Obviously, this image is too big. You need to make it a little bit smaller. I'll leave that to you guys to figure out as part of your homework. So, but basically, this is the idea. I'm hovering over this. The event is actually on mouse out. On mouse out just means that when you leave like the coordinates of this image, an event will be triggered. Right, so on mouse out, event trigger, then the event on mouse out is associated with books. So then the event handler is books, and then if everything works out, the event handler runs books, and then whatever the code is will run. So here you can see me, I'm about to leave. And there you go. So this just allows me, it's a nice way to make sure it works. Because why did I do this? Because I could have coded the function already, right? But then it doesn't work. And then the question would be, what did I do wrong? Is it an error in the function, or is it an error in the pipeline from event triggering to event handling? Okay, and so that's why I would recommend this to make your life easier with debugging. Okay, so that's pretty much it as far as that. So now, see, nothing is happening, mouse out, triggers the event. Okay, so I'm gonna close this one and I'm gonna go back to the code. All right, so we're almost done. So now what you guys will need to do is obviously find 3 different images of books, size them appropriately, and you're gonna have this effect. On mouse move, show the description of the books. On mouse out, clear it out. So basically then, that means because there are 2 events, on mouse move and on mouse out, we will need to have at least two, let's say, event handlers. It just depends on the complexity of the functions that you guys want to create. So let's go ahead and do that now. Let's do it more appropriately. I'm gonna go to script over here. I'm still gonna leave function in there, just kind of for reference. But now I'm gonna create the appropriate functions. Let's keep doing this. Function. I'm gonna call this one display book. All right, so display book, okay. Again, I'm gonna start following the jQuery approach, right? jQuery approach. So then I'm gonna do a display book will be some kind of a function. I still need to define what I want in there. And then that will be the function associated on mouse move, okay? So that will be the function associated on mouse move. Then I'm gonna do another function clear book, right? So clear book will just be the function whenever I do on mouse out, I'm going to, and those are basically my 2 event handlers that I need to specify, okay? So how are we gonna do this? So there's a couple of ways. jQuery, later on, you'll see that this is very straightforward to do in jQuery. For now, we're just gonna use the standard DOM approach, right? So the document object model approach, which basically means that we're going to call document. Okay, so I call document. So a way to think about this is, remember, jQuery is a library, right? And so it's really, jQuery is a library that has functions, and the functions there might be written like this, like the way I'm writing it here, but you don't have to write it like that when you write your code, because you have optimized functions that do that for you, okay? So that's kind of a good way of thinking about this. So anyway, I want to do clear book, right? So to make something appear and disappear on the screen, we need to call it and change the style. So if you notice initially, there's a div called book3 in the HTML. But whenever it runs for the first time, it is set, whenever it runs statically for the first time, the display style is set to none. Okay, it's set to none. So that makes it disappear. Sometimes we want it to appear, right? So, and then we're just gonna change the display to, let's say, something else like block, right? So these are things that you just have to refresh your memory by reading up on the CSS. All right, so let's do clear book. All right, so I'm gonna go over here, clear book, and I'm gonna call the document. And then if you might remember that that when you took 110, there was a function that allowed you to grab an object in the DOM by the ID, right? And you probably remember that it was called get element by ID. Once we move into jQuery, we won't have to use this anymore, but it's good, you know, for right now, kind of to use this just to kind of for the review. So now I have get element by ID, right? And I just need to specify which element I want. So in this case, the element that I want is the book ID, right? So book one. I currently have one div in there at least, and it's called book one. Dot. Then what do I want to do with that object? Well, through DOM, I can call for that object the style. This is called, by the way, chaining. And it's very common in JavaScript where you have all these dots and you're just saying like, I grab this element and then this element and then this attribute of the element and then this value of the element and you can change it. So I'm going to change the display, right? And I'm going to change it to something. All right, so you can change it to, let's say, block. Or you can change it, actually you will want this to be none. But now let's think about it. So I'm going to do clear book now. I can call it. I can also just, you know, play around with this. So I'm going to say clear book here. Clear book. All right. So now clear book, basically, the logic says clear book should grab book one and display it. So let's see what happens. Okay, so, and that's only on mouse out. All right, so let's do that. Okay, so now I'm gonna go ahead and I have the page open. No, I need to open the page. And let's just see what happens. So usually I like to just run things and see how they work. So currently nothing should happen. If this is correct, and there you see it. Did you guys see what happened?
Yes.
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's basically it, right? So this time around, I was in the image, and again, I was doing some actions, some events. The image is associated with an action called on mouse out. When I went out, I triggered the event, and it was associated with the event handler clear books, which actually right now it's actually doing the opposite, right? It only displayed the information. So, and that's kind of the intuition. Obviously, we need to make this a little bit nicer by, you know, making some modifications to it. But this, again, we're currently just focusing on the pipeline. So now let's take this a step further. So actually, clear book, now that we've done that, let's appropriately make clear book what it should be, which is none, right? So we want to remove it from there, right? So we want to remove it from there. So then display book actually should be kind of the opposite, right? So display book should be, it's going to be a little bit more complex than this, but you can see this is the one where we want block. So now display book should be associated with on mouse move, right? That should be associated, display book should be associated with the event on mouse move. Clear book should be associated with the event on mouse out. Okay, so that's the simple, and that's really, at this point, if this works, we're done, right? We're done, and we really just have to, everything else, we're done with, let's say, the mechanics of it, like the machine is working. Now we just have to refine it and complete it, but everything is done. So let's just try it and see if it works. So I've saved it again. I'm gonna probably have to, no, okay, it's still here. So I'm gonna refresh it. Okay, so now comes the big test, right? So I'm gonna mouse over and hopefully I get the text. There it is, excellent, got the text. So now if I mouse out, the text should go away, and it did, right? So that's it. I mean, that's all semester, honestly, at least half of the semester on the client side, we'll be doing this. but we're just going to see lots of things in jQuery, .js files. We're going to see how to do this. And of course, there's so much. I mean, there's, I think I told you this, there's even there's now JS for machine learning, for artificial intelligence, for all kinds of things. So you can put models in your websites, for prediction and things like that, which is one of the things I want to do towards the end of the semester. But we kind of have to go through all the steps. All right, so that's it. That completes it. So I think you guys can now, this will be part of your homework assignment, right? So what you have to do is you have to have 3 books. Obviously, resize the images, get appropriate images. I leave it to you. Just make it look nice. Maybe 3 horizontal images next to each other. Maybe add some spacing. However you want to do it, really. But have 3 books, 3 different books. Then when a person hovers one of the books, they get the correct description, right? So PHP book or whatever. Then when they move out, it should disappear. When they move into the next one, it shows the corresponding. So you guys are responsible for that. So what does that mean as far as the code? Well, you have the divs here. Modify the descriptions, of course. In the table, add the appropriate images. Display book and clear book should be, don't create a function like display book 1, clear book 1, display book 2, clear book 2. That, that's too many, use modular programming, right? So use the same function, display book and clear book. So really clear book, you should be using it here. Clear book, like that. So figure it out, figure out how to do it. And for display book, I want you to use the same function, okay? I've seen students, their solution is just to create one for each, but, imagine if you had 100 images, that, you don't want to code all those, you don't want to code all of those functions, right? Instead, you want to have a single function and maybe provide attributes. So the easy solution is just to do something like this. You pass the attribute through the function. So for instance, you can say, well, this is for book 1. Guess what? I'm just going to say book 1 here. This is for book 2. All right. Book 2. All right. So you can just pass the attribute. At this point, I'm just going to use the same image. Right now I have, you guys should change this, but here I'm just using the same image. Okay, so I've refreshed this. Oh, yeah, that's what I was. Use single quotes here, sorry, because these are in double quotes. Make sure you just use single quotes. That way, you won't have a conflict in the fact that you have a double quote here and a double quote here. Make sure that these then are single quotes. So, book 1, book 2. All right, just do it like that. All right, so now let's, because we are providing these attributes, we need to then modify this a little bit. So I'm just going to create like book ID maybe, all right, book ID. So now that way I can more efficiently do this. So instead of hard coding book 1 here, I can just provide the variable name. So book ID. All right, that way now I will grab literally, and then with clear book, what you could do is just to make things easier is you can either pass the parameter or actually just always clear all books. So that's entirely up to you, really. But you'll see what I'm just doing that. All right, so this should work, I think. This should work. So let's, again, let's try it out. So I'm going to save it. I'm going to go here. Now there should be there should be two images here. There you go. There's the second image. Obviously, we want to make that a little bit prettier. But now we have book 1 is the first, book 2 is the second. So if I hover over book 1, I should get, book 1. Hover out, hover in. Oh, and let me change in the text just so we can see the difference. I'm going to say this is actually, let's say, an HTML book. HTML book. And this is going to be Mary Jones, and then publisher, KDP, something. And ISBN, this is going to be 23, and this is 47. Just making up some numbers. All right, so now I can save it again, go to my website, refresh the page. All right, so now if I hover over first image, I get PHP book, Robert Oliver, good. Hover out, goes away. There's nothing down here. Now I hover over the second book, and you can see HTML book, Mary Jones. So obviously, we don't want the text to appear in the same place. So we will have to address that issue as well. But otherwise, we're in good shape, right? Our currently, so this was probably a good time to introduce the idea of MVC, Model View Control. So Model View Control, which is the standard programming framework that we will use in this semester, basically says that Model View Control is the approach that we use to code, right? So it just means that we separate the files, or we organize the files based on what they do. So if they represent the model, the view, or the control, where model means the data, like databases or that kind of thing. View means HTML and CSS things, presentation, text boxes, color scheme, size of images, things like that. And control means the logic, which will be either client side or server side. So the JS files, jQuery files, or the PHP files, okay? So right now, that's what we're basically, doing. We've got the logic going, we've got the control going, but the presentation, the view is still needs a little bit of work. Okay, and actually in MVC, it would basically mean that all of this JavaScript would be in a .js file, and all of the HTML, CSS would be in another file. Currently, you can always have it together, right? You can have it together as I have, but as we start getting into the semester, we're going to start breaking this up because, otherwise we end up with all this spaghetti code. If you think we got CSS mixed in with HTML, mixed in with like JavaScript, and we don't really want that. We want to separate it out into individual pieces. So you will see how we will do that. And that is called, as I said, Model View Control, or MVC. Okay, are there any questions so far, guys?
I don't think so.
No questions. Remember, this is homework 1. This is part of the homework. This is problem 1. I will specify on the submission link, this is complete problem 1. This one, the dynamic book page that we did in class, finish it. And then problem 2, the grade calculator, right? And I leave it to you guys to complete as well. So that one, I usually don't do that much of those from scratch. Instead, I ask you to solve that one. But, that's why I provide examples today. So, okay. So the only thing I think that's missing from our website that I want to give you, and then I'll let you guys do the rest, is this problem that the text kind of appears down here on the left. You know, we may not want that. So let's go ahead and think about what we can do. So usually in a browser, because this is all event driven, there is actually a standard global variable, if you want to call it that, called event itself, okay? So there's a variable called event. And so what we can do, if you'd like, is that whenever you pass something to the, whenever we pass something to a function from an event, from an event to an event handler, we can actually pass the event itself. So we can just say event. What kind of an event is this? This is going to be a clicking event or a mouse event. That's probably a better way of putting it. This is a mouse event, okay? So it's going to be event. We just pass this event to the function. So that way we can keep track of some information related to the event that caused this, right? So in display book, I can just say event over here. And now I have it, or you can call it something else if it's confusing to you that we're using the same name. Just call it E, right, for event. The great thing about this is that E contains the information about the mouse. So for instance, one thing that we might want to use is the coordinates. So I can say E dot client X, right? And that just means the coordinate of the mouse at the X position. And then I can say Y E dot client Y, okay? Remember that JavaScript is case sensitive, so watch out for that. Once I have this, right? Once I have this, I have the coordinates X and Y. And so what I could probably do is adjust those. So I can say up here, just going to copy this. All right, make sure this is indented appropriately. All right, so now I can say, what is this? This is going to be in style, right? So it's a style for book ID, but we're going to change, instead of display, we're going to change this to use the coordinates. So usually you can reference top and assign to it the Y coordinate, Y. Those should be lowercase. And left will be for the X coordinate, if I remember correctly. So let's see. So let's try that. Let's just see what happens. But this, as I said, if you understood, an event, you mouse out, an event is triggered. What caused the event? Well, the mouse, and so you have in E, you capture the mouse. The mouse itself is an object, so you have its coordinates. Where was the mouse? The little arrow, right? So we've captured those in E and Y, and now we're going to go to the style sheet, and for the div, right, for the div book ID, we're going to change those parameters. So let's see if that works, right? So let's go ahead, save it. And now I'm going to refresh the page. All right, so let's see if this works. Okay, it didn't work. Did not work. Let's see, let me think about this. Oh, maybe. Oh, okay, wait. Maybe if I need to specify something else, right? I need to specify the position. So I think hopefully this will work. If I specify position, and then I say something like absolute. All right, so let's try that. So it's a CSS thing, I think. Ah, there we go. You see that, guys? And there might be better ways of doing this, but at least now we're getting there, right? Do you guys see what I'm doing?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, so that's a CSS thing. You'll have to, again, recommend you strongly read up on your CSS because you want to make pages that are prettier and everything. So, but yeah, that was the missing parameter. And so now I've refreshed my page, and every time I trigger the event, right, I'm rendering, I'm capturing the coordinates. So now the div tag is moving around over here. It's not very readable, and it's kind of like, I think it's fine. I mean, I think it's fine. There it is. But obviously you can improve this a lot more. All right, so that, what else can we do? You can change the border, right? If you want to add a border, that's a thing that you can do. You can change the font size. Obviously, maybe you want to make that bigger. That image is too big, so make it smaller. The actual description of the book might be too small for some people, so make that bigger. Maybe you want to add a background color. That's certainly, if you look there, you can't make it out, right? You can't really read it. So you probably want to put in a background on there. But those things I will leave for you guys to do, okay? Now, so that's basically it. Everything else you can solve on your own. Just make it prettier. But I do want to show you just one last thing. And this is more something about style over really just coding. Because, as I said, I'm trying to get everything to be as close to jQuery as possible. So really, when you do jQuery, you don't do things like this, right? You would do something like, it's just the jQuery way, if you want to call it that. We're going to select an object. In jQuery, you always select an object. So I'm going to call this selected book. Yeah, that's a good one. Selected book. And instead of repeating all of this, I'm just going to do that. Okay. So I grab the object itself, right? And I'm going to have that object now selected object. That's usually the jQuery way. So then I have the object, and now I can say with selected, what is it? Selected book dot style, right? And then now in curly brackets, I can do this, right? So that way, this is just, as I said, the jQuery way. It's kind of like this. So then I'm gonna plug that in here, and now I no longer need all of this repetition. So I can get rid of that, and I can get rid of this, and I can get rid of all of these. Okay. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to do this. Okay. Obviously, indentation, pretty important. It's not going to break anything, but just for readability. All right. And then add a little bit of spacing there as well. I would recommend that. Okay. So now we're just going to test this in a second to make sure it works. But that's just, as I said, this is just the jQuery way. All right. The style of coding. All right, so now save it. Save it. I'm actually going to add one more thing just to kind of make sure it all works. So I'm going to say background color. Background color. And let's just try some color. Beige. Oops. And you can play with these things, but let's just do that. Okay, so now I'm going to save it. I'm going to refresh the page. Refresh. So now let's see what happens. Ah, there we go. Although, okay, once again, that's not working. If you see my error, let me know. I must have an error, I think.
Professor, in
Mm-hmm.
in my experience, I never had any luck with like writing the colors. I always had to use the hex codes.
So you think it's the word? The word? Okay, that's a good
yeah.
a good suggestion. So let's take out that's a comment, right? Just comment it out, and let's see if that brings it back again. So I'm gonna refresh it. Nope. That didn't. Right, as I'm refreshing, I can. Oops. I must be missing something. Oh, you know what I think it is? No, that's not it. Okay. With selected. So it's gotta be here, right? It's gotta be somewhere on here. Let me put an alert here. I usually put alerts. Let's see if I can get to this alert. So I'm gonna do that. Save it. Refresh. Okay, so the alert works. So it's not a syntax error. Display. Block. Position absolute. Background color is disabled. Let's try that. So the color works, but now that's not working. All right, so let's use the rest of the time to just work on these two problems, okay? And let me see if I can figure out what's wrong with this. Also, you guys can just revert back to what I had, but let me figure out if, I think this looks correct. I just can't see the error right now. All right, so let's do that. So you have this problem, all right? So just basically finish it up, okay? So all you have to do is take 3 books, obviously resize the images, make them look better. And then obviously, you know, you probably don't want to use a yellow background. Add a description for each one, and they should hover over, as I had it a few minutes ago, okay? So work on solving that problem, and that'll be good. Then after that, so that's problem number one. Problem number two is, as you remember, work on this handout, right? So I always provide one problem for you to solve from scratch. So again, just follow this description, create a grade calculator where you can enter some grades and then calculate the grade. So it's gonna have all of these text boxes, right? All of these text boxes. Students or you know, do some input validation, make sure that they can only enter the maximum number of points for each text box. And then when you've written everything, maybe have a button or something and calculate the final grade, okay? So these are the two problems that you have to do for this week. So let me actually create the assignment link. So I'm gonna go over here, the table of contents. And on here, I'm just gonna do create assignment, okay? So this will be, let's call it intro homework. 100. The due date will be, today is the 14th, right? So you get 1 week. So that means this will be due on the 21st by 10 p.m. Eastern time. Okay. This is going to start displaying from yesterday, the 13th, and it'll stay open. If it's due on the 21st, it'll stay open until the 23rd. So make sure you submit before then. So the assignment is complete the following. Right, complete the following. Problem one. The dynamic books problem worked in class. And then problem two, complete the grade calculator website described in the Word document. Okay? Is this clear enough, guys, of what you have to do?
Yeah, I
I'd
think
say.
so.
Okay, so remember what you have to do is complete these problems. They should not be on the same page. Complete two separate websites, okay? Two separate websites. Okay, yeah. So just do, treat every problem always as a separate website. So this one, just complete what I did. Take what I did and just finish it. And then take problem two basically and build it from scratch. Remember, you need to enter the grades, press some kind of button, and calculate the final grade. So keep it as simple as possible. Follow the description on there in the handout. All right, so that's the assignment. So as you can see, the link is already live, and you can start working on this, okay, for next week. Yeah, so I'm recording, I think I'm recording, aren't I?
Yeah, you're recording.
Yeah, I am recording, so yeah, so I'm recording. So when, I'll post a video. As, someone asked me that. Okay, so now that's it. So please start working on these problems. Let me think about why this didn't work.
Can I see your code one more time?
Aren't you seeing that?
I would okay. I want to see the
We're
last couple sentence, the dive one. Can you scroll down a little bit? At the end of your code.
Yes. Here or where?
Yes, right here.
Okay.
Okay, you didn't do any changes while you doing on the script. Okay, never mind. That's all I need. Thanks. Give me 1 second.
Yes, is that what you
Yeah.
said?
Yeah, that's all I need.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Okay. Right, like I said, all of this, the video will be posted on the YouTube channel. You can always take a look at it again. Just expect that sometime later tonight. And then, as I said, just work on these two problems. I've described this already on the Brightspace, what I want you to do. And remember, submit, 2 folders, but just one zip file, okay? Please, guys, one. I've noticed sometimes I've had, if I assign 4 problems, please don't submit 4 zip files. Okay, just submit one zip file with everything in it. That I will download it to my computer, unzip it, and then I need to run. Remember, when I grade this, I have to run every single one of your programs. So make sure that you also include maybe like a Word document or PDF with screenshots. That just shows me evidence that it worked. That can be helpful to you. Okay. All right, so the rest of the time that we have today, at this point, I'm going to stop the recording and I'm just going to leave it open to like an open lab. So no more new content and you can just work on this or ask questions, okay? All right, guys. So hopefully, we're gonna end the class here. If you can see, I have, so just a little workaround here. At least you can see I left the background color and display within the with statement. I just moved these back out. It's not a perfect solution, it's a workaround. When we use jQuery, it wouldn't even matter anyway, but I leave it to you guys to kind of figure out, maybe you can look up what the problem was, but this works, so that at least is good. So you can see here, I've saved the file, and now I'm gonna go refresh the page, and you can see, there we go. So it's back sort of working again, HTML for that one book, PHP for the other book. All right, so that's fine. I mean, just use that and just finish up the problem. So you can see here I have both functions. Pretty much all the functionality is there. Just finish this up to make it a little bit more presentable. Again, remember, add 3 images, add the description, make it look a little bit better. And then work on the other problem. Remember the grade calculator, have a few text boxes, fill in the appropriate grades, and then you can, however you want to do it, calculate the grade. Okay, so that's basically all for today. That's it for today. So we're going to stop here. And if you have any questions, please just, I'll stay a few minutes to answer any questions. Otherwise, have a good weekend, and I will see you guys next week.
I have a quick question for the information about for the